This giving season, put ministry in motion. Your gift to United Methodist Communications equips churches and pastors with the tools and training they need to carry the gospel forward. Make your gift today at umcom.org/GT2025. It's our 200th episode. Thank you for joining us as the Reverend Dr. Ron Bell, Dr. Ashley Boggan, and the Reverend Matt Rawle take a look at the profound change the United Methodist Church has experienced during the past 4 years and share honest reflections on what these shifts mean for how United Methodists live into transformation with love, joy, and courage. Hi, my name is Crystal Cavanis. I'm your host on Get Your Spirit in Shape. Welcome to our 200th episode. Wow, it's unbelievable. And I'm also so excited. For today's special milestone event, I've invited 3 guests who are no strangers to Get Your Spirit in Shape. They're people who've shared their stories and their wisdom with our audience across the years, and I'm just really honored that you've joined us today. I welcome the Reverend Dr. Ron Bell, Dr. Ashley Boggan, and Reverend Matt Rawle. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Crystal.
Oh, it's an honor, and congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
200.
Woo! Thank you. So Ron and Matt have actually changed locations since you were on last. So I'm going to ask you to update our audience on what you're doing these days. And Ashley, I'd love for you to also tell our audience about what you're doing, and don't forget to talk about your 2 new books. So we'll do this alphabetically and start with you, Ron.
Yes, so since the last time we were on together, I am now the senior pastor at Asbury United Methodist Church in downtown D.C., the oldest Black church in D.C. on its original property. And so it's been an incredible experience and journey, and a lot of stuff going on. So it's been fun.
That's awesome. That's great. Ashley, how about you?
I'm still in New Jersey, which is great, but I have had a busy year and a half. I don't remember the last time I was on, but I have had 2 books come out. First was Wesleyan Vitality, Reclaiming the Heart of Methodist Identity. It came out in April. And then the second came out, I believe, August, and it's Calling on Fire, Reclaiming the Method of Methodism. And that was written with another guest of Get Your Spirit in Shape, Reverend Dr. Chris Hickert.
Yes, and Ashley is the General Secretary of the General Commission on Archives and History.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you.
Yes, I am newly appointed to St. Matthew's United Methodist Church in Metairie, and also Carrollton United Methodist Church in the Garden District of New Orleans. It's not a 2-point charge. It is a dual appointment. So it is 2 separate systems, 2 finance teams, 2 governance boards. So it's been interesting to navigate all of that. And we got the call the Thursday after Mother's Day, which is exceedingly late in our appointive system. So it's been a whirlwind, man. It's been great. So I'm coming back home. So I'm from New Orleans originally. So I am coming back home, which is wonderful and lovely. And I hate to say goodbye to. I was serving Asbury up in Bossier City, Louisiana, but being back home is a real gift. And being from New Orleans, there's no place like it. Either you get it or you don't. I get to see the streetcar pass my office window every day. And I just don't need much more than that. It's just a beautiful setting. And it's a city that loves being alive, right? It's just a really laissez les bon temps rouler, right? People let the good times roll. And it's very much my speed. So we are back loud and proud in New Orleans, and we're thankful.
I am the second host for Get Your Spirit in Shape. My predecessor, who created the podcast, Joe Iovino, was the host for 100 episodes. And that episode, which aired September 30th, 2021, featured a conversation with the now retired Bishop Minerva Carcano. So it was a really special 100th episode. But today I'd like for us to talk about how the United Methodist Church has changed in the time span of the past 100 episodes since I first started hosting. So since the fall of 2021, the United Methodist Church has experienced the pandemic, disaffiliations, General Conference, historic votes at General Conference, And possibly by the time this episode airs on November 21st, we will have the results of the vote on worldwide regionalization. So that's a lot of really big experiences over the past 4 years. So I want to start, just kind of go back and let's start 4 years ago. To remind everyone, we're talking about the fall of 2021. We were in our second year of the COVID-19 pandemic. Almost everybody had learned to use Zoom or Facebook Live by that time for meetings and their church services. And we were starting to venture out more as people with masks, and vaccinations were available. And we were really starting to live into a pandemic world. It's kind of what that looked like. So as a church, who were we then? Who was the United Methodist Church in the fall of 2021?
Gosh, I'm trying to think back to what was I doing that fall? I actually think I think I had been general secretary for about 10 months, because I started January of 2021. And for those first 10 months, there was no travel required, which, I think about today, I travel probably 65% of the time for work. And I remember the first meeting where we actually tried to gather in person. I believe it was a GCFA meeting in Nashville, and it ended up being canceled because half the people got COVID on the plane and tested positive when we landed. And so it was one of those, like, and I feel like that summarizes that fall, because there was a lot of like attempts to try to get back to some sense of reality. And yet we were still in the pandemic, very much so. And so, trying to come together, figuring out how to do that safely, figuring out how to talk to people face to face again was also an adjustment.
Yeah, and did you have a full collection of masks by that time? Like, I had Sunday masks, I had grocery store masks,
Yes.
I started to have holiday themed masks. I mean, it was like we were definitely living into it.
Okay, and there were totally the folks who would like coordinate their mask to their outfit, and I was definitely not one of those. I was usually the person who, having two small kids, I usually ended up with one of their masks in my pocket. And so like it would barely cover my mouth because it's a child's mask. And you're like, so you're trying to balance the whole, I'm wearing one, but it's probably doing nothing. Yeah.
I was one of those ones who matched the mask with the bow tie or the tie. Yes.
Amazing.
I love that.
I was thinking about this. The fall of 2021, I was still pastoring Camp Memorial United Methodist Church in St. Paul, Minnesota. So Derek Chauvin had just been convicted. I want to say it was that April. So we were dealing with the emotional cleanup of all of that, from George Floyd to the city to the police and so there was this real tidal wave of soberness, of grief, of where do we go from now? Vicarious trauma was being spoken of a lot. I was in a lot of conversations with different churches and leadership around how do you deal with vicarious trauma? How do you deal with fatigue? With people trying to figure out how to fight and where to go. And so 21, at least where I was at, there was a lot of that tension around who are we and how do we reconcile for these emotions and feelings and what do we do with them? And look at what's happening to our church. Our church is crumbling. Our church is uncertain of what it is. And we're in masks. And so there was a lot of that happening all at once in 21. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Ron, for reminding us too of what was happening in in the United States, just the trauma that was happening around George Floyd's murder and the trial and the convictions and all of that. And that also impacted what was going on in our churches, because there was a renewal of a focus on the racial injustice. And I know there were a lot of book studies happening. And so thank you for bringing us into reminding us that was part of this timeline as well. Matt, what do you recall as who we were as a church in the fall of 2021?
Ain't nobody happy. That was nobody's happy. with masks, no masks. It was this constant push and pull, because there were some folks who thought like we should all be masked up. There are some folks who thought wearing masks was somehow cowardice, and no one was happy. And not only that, but like right around that time, my church council, reading the tea leaves, because I was on the general and jurisdictional team for Louisiana, our church council was preparing ourselves to not have a vote for disaffiliation. So we were preparing ourselves to say, how do we say this? We're going to be United Methodist. Like, regardless of how the discipline changes in the future, we were United Methodist and we're going to remain United Methodist. So I was dealing with that first kind of wave of folks who didn't feel that God was calling them to remain in the United Methodist Church. And right around that time, I was thinking about there seemed to have been 3 distinct marathons that we were running in COVID. That first marathon was a traumatic innovation. Like trauma in the sense of we didn't know what was happening, how this was spreading. I mean, we were wiping down groceries. Is it okay to shake hands? Like, we just didn't know. But at the same time, the church was kind of thrust into an innovative space. What does it mean to be incarnational when no one is with each other? Like, it's for the first time, the ascension was true. Like, Jesus had gone to sit at the right hand of the Father, and he is not here. And we're trying to figure out how to be the body of Christ, really, I think for the first time in my generation, for sure, So traumatic innovation. But then that gave way to existential exhaustion. Like, doing the regular things like math homework for my kids was 5 times as hard as it needed to be. You're hybrid and no one really knew how to do that. Well, I say no one, that's a generalization, but sometimes lessons were in person, sometimes they weren't. And it was just really, really hard. But also at the same time, people were asking me big questions. Do I want to stay in the same relationship? Do I want to stay in the same job, the same church? And I don't think disaffiliation was immune to that. I think that was a big part of how all of that came to be, is we were all collectively, culturally turning a page, so to speak, during that time. But then that gave way to, I think, which was the most troubling marathon, and I call it nostalgic scarcity. We didn't have the same people, we didn't have the same resources, but yet there was a temptation to get back to what it felt like it was in 2019. Because I heard constantly, Pastor, when are we going to get back to fill in the blank, right? When are we going to get back to the ice cream social? When are we going to get back to having hymns and singing out loud? When are we going to get back to, and like, there was this constant push to recapture and not having the hard conversations of COVID killed a lot of things. And there's some things that are not coming back. And what does that mean? We need to talk about for now investments and forever investments moving forward. So like, those 3 marathons were kind of happening all at the same time, which is why I thank God for clergy. I mean, that's why I think a lot of folks said, peace out. I'm being called away from this out of sheer exhaustion in a lot of ways. So.
Yeah, I just want to add, Matt has re-triggered some trauma for me.
You're welcome.
As I think
so I'm here, baby.
Having to be a parent and a pastor, watching my children rehearse for choir on Zoom was just,
man.
That's a pain you can't get rid of.
There's some things the Lord did not ordain.
Yes, he did not ordain
at-home
that.
Band at-home band rehearsal
not ordain that.
Well, I was just going to say, Ron, I was going to say the same thing. Matt, I'm kind of tired now. We need to go after thinking about, but we made it through that. But what was also happening really simultaneously was that the United Methodist Church was living into what was known as paragraph 2553. And that gave congregations an opportunity, if they had conflict over issues related to human sexuality, they could leave with their property. And I'm simplifying it tremendously, but that was what gave way to this, at the end of it, by the time it ended in the end of December of 2023, about a quarter of congregations had chosen to leave the United Methodist Church. So again, we're in a very unknown space. What do y'all remember about that time? And it's going to be more trauma. I'm sorry.
I always think it's so fascinating. This is going to be a future Methodist history trivia question. So if you are a fan of Methodist history trivia, here's your answer. That is probably the only paragraph that's been passed by a general conference that will never appear in a book of discipline. And thinking about that and how consequential the passing of that paragraph was for the United Methodist Church, for individual and local congregations who used it for various ends and means and purposes. It is just fascinating. And from, this Wesleyan historian perspective, creating that temporary loophole around the trust clause is just talk about personal trauma. that is breaking some really sacred forms of connectionalism that Wesley sought to implement in the Methodist Episcopal Church way back in the 1800s or 1700s. Yeah.
Now, for me, it was this is a story and then scripture. Locally in Louisiana, there was a church just up the road from us that disaffiliated. And the week after they disaffiliated, they called my church because they were taking a mission trip, but they didn't have enough vehicles. So they called us and wanting to use our vehicle for their mission trip. And I was pretty clear. It's like you just voted to say you didn't need the connection, my guy. And look, I looked up our insurance. We can only loan our vehicle to United Methodist congregations. So I'm so sorry, which is a lie, and I'll answer to Jesus for that. But it was innocent as doves, but as wise as a serpent. No, during that time, in terms of disaffiliation, because a lot of things that were not true were being shared, and it's just a real quick rule: if you have to spin your point, then it's not the gospel. If you have to spin it, then it's not the gospel, right? So I am reminded of the story of the healing of the Gerasene demoniac. There's this beautiful healing of Jesus bringing restoration to a man and telling him to go home because that is where his ministry is. But consequentially, all of the legion that was in the man was sent into the pigs, and the pigs jumped off a cliff. So all the swine herders said, "Wait a damn minute! You just ruined all of our capital. We just lost all of our money." And sometimes there are people who would rather keep their property than seek healing of the human soul. So there's the paragraph. It's for all the pig herders.
Jesus.
I'm just reading the Bible, man. I'm just reading the Bible.
By 23, I was doing a lot of work with annual conferences, and I felt like a divorce attorney, right? Because every annual conference there were a bunch of folk who were threatening to leave, wanting to leave, other folk who wanted them to stay, didn't want to stay. And so there was this constant back and forth of how do we communicate in the midst of fracturing? And that's the work I was really doing. How do we help communicate well in the midst of the fracture? It hasn't fully formed yet. There's this thing about grief where there's this pre-grief that sometimes we get when we know something or someone's going to die. And so we start the process, right? Even though the person or thing hasn't died yet, we're already in the grieving process. And so I was seeing a lot of that in 23, just trying to figure out how we get to the other side of this. But even while it's crumbling or fracturing in front of us, how are we using language? How are we sustaining ourselves? How are we finding identity? And so that's what that season was like. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was in the fall 2021 when we were still pretty sure we were going to have a general conference in 2022, right? That was still, we were pretty sure we were going to have it in some way, shape, or form.
In Minneapolis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's, right, talk about, your pre-grief. I feel like before any season of general conference, there's some pre-grief or pre-traumatic stress, right? Of preparing for just the thing that is general conference and doing it knowing that This is the first time we're all coming together, that we are in this season of disaffiliation, that we don't know who else is going to be there. Like all of that too, just added to the general church level of anxiety. It seems really long ago, and yet like yesterday. Like I don't know how to reconcile that.
Yeah, it's true. It does seem like such a long time ago, but yet I do feel like we still live in the ripples of some of that trauma and grief. And so I don't want to I don't want to fast forward us too much. However, we do still have, we still have some events to go, because we are now we're finally know, in fact, if you were at General Conference or you purchased the t-shirt that the General Commission on Archives and History produced, it was like General Conference, and it had all the dates marked out: 2020, 2021, 2022. And finally, here we are in not Minneapolis, but Charlotte, North Carolina in 2024. So I know what I felt like going into that General Conference, but I'd love to hear you guys talk about, because I do think you came at it from different places. So I'd love to hear you talk about that.
So my job at General Conference, I was in charge of the prayer room for General Conference. And so I had to hire all of the spiritual directors. We had to coordinate who was going to be doing the prayer room, what times. We had to meet with all the bishops who were going to be providing communion and organize what days they were going to do communion. And then work with the worship team to make sure the bishop had what they wanted. I'll leave that alone. But it was so that was my job during General Conference, was every day staffing the prayer room, being at the prayer room, organizing spiritual directors, meeting with the worship team to make sure we had bishops lined up to do the communion. And what I can tell you, by and large, whether you were on side A or side B, whether you were for or against, whether you were in or out, however you want to phrase it, by and large, what I saw were people grappling with what now. And they would come in the prayer room. We pray for them. We would anoint them. We provide communion. But there's just this sense of, we're past the rainbow. What now? We're past the cliff. What now? And no one seemed to confidently, joyously have a stake in the ground and answer. There was just this pervasive sense of, we did a thing. now we have to live into it. And so that's what I saw during General Conference. Yeah.
For me, it was one of the first General Conferences. Well, it was the first General Conference where I went and I didn't feel like I had to go and win. The last several General Conferences, 2019 especially, I felt like it was our job to rally and to politic and to have our talking points and to win the day. I didn't get that sensation when I went to General Conference 2024. I mean, there's still plenty of things to do, but I didn't get the sense of, we are going to leave here as winners or losers. So there was a very different feel, at least for me, in the room of, we can lovingly lean into some legislations and really pay attention to some of this stuff, instead of, is this going to give the other side of the room fodder to overturn something, right? I just didn't feel like there was a sense that we had to win. And I welcomed, because there was, we ended with Love Train, right? People all over the world, join hands, start a love train. And a lot of my friends who had disaffiliated were really upset. They're like, see, they're doing a secular song, and what is the love train nonsense? They should do Come Ye Sinners to the Gospel Feast, which is also a great song, harder to sing. But here's my point, is that, friends, the line between the sacred and the secular is function. It is bread and it is juice until it is blessed and broken and shared. And in that moment, yeah, there's a secular song, but it was blessed and broken and shared in that room, right? So, and that to me was affirmation that from my friends, some of my friends who are and they're still my friends, but their anger at see, look at what they're doing. And just to say, like, there was lament in me for them, Like, I'm so sorry that this is bringing you anger. That us singing a soul song is bringing you such anger. And that, I think that's sad. So for the first time, I didn't feel like we had to win something. And then we went out singing joyfully. And that to me was, felt like worship.
Yeah, the 2020-2024 General Conference, which was held in 2024, was just such a stark difference from the other general conferences I'd been to. So my first full session was 2016, which I was still doing my PhD. I was an intern at the connectional table. And I remember being told by both my boss and kind of spiritual advisor to prepare for general conference, like spiritually prepare, to bring things with me that would center me. And I did not take it seriously. And I should have, because after 2016 general conference, I really struggled with how to be in the United Methodist Church that conferenced in such a way as it did. And then that was only deepened in 2019, and when it came time for 2024, I was in the general secretary role, and I was, me and Reverend Dr. Meredith Hoxie-Scholl took about 15 students from Drew Theological School and gathered with other seminary students from other seminaries. And we put them all in a room to help teach them the inner workings of general conference, share speakers, and provide a space to do some of that reflective work in a safe communal space about things that happened. And Meredith was with me at 2016 General Conference. And so she and I both told our students, bring your emotional support, whatever, because you might need it. And as the votes kept coming down and passing on consent calendar, I swear most of our students thought that we were bananas, that we had told them that, this could be this really emotionally triggering thing, that you need to make sure you have something that will ground you. And I just remember telling them, I am so glad that this is your first general conference, and that your first general conference is truly an experience of holy conferencing, of how we're supposed to be when we come together and discern the Spirit of God moving through the people called United Methodist, that this is how you experience that. And you experience in a place where Love Train breaks out, right? Purely by a movement of the Holy Spirit, and bishops come off the stage and everybody's, dancing around. I never would have imagined that happening at a general conference. And the fact that it did is absolutely beautiful. And for me, it was reaffirming of not only my commitment to the United Methodist Church, but to the way that the United Methodist Church can be and can witness in this world.
Let's take a break from our conversation to talk about why your story matters. Your church may be small, your offering might feel ordinary, but your story, it's part of something extraordinary. In the United Methodist Church, apportioned giving is how we live out that story together. Every gift supports a ministry, every church plays a role, and when we share what God is doing in and through us, we inspire others to give, to serve, and to believe. That's the heart of the United in Impact campaign. So don't underestimate the power of your story or your gift. Let's walk together, give together, grow together. Want to share how your church is making an impact? Email us at unitedimpact@umc.org. We'd love to hear from you. To find resources or learn more, visit resourceumc.org/unitedinimpact. Now let's get back to our conversation. I remember just having a lot of hope going into, but I felt like we did go in as one church and we came out as somebody else. So I want to talk specifically about some of those historic votes, because I think that's what the past year and a half, learning to live into those votes and what that looks like as a United Methodist Church who now has said we can do this and we can do that, what that looks like. So, but I don't want to skip over. Ashley, I'm going to put you on the spot and talk about some of the historic votes, but please chime in, anyone else that wants to talk about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, at I think the votes at 2024 General Conference were historic for many reasons, not only because they overturned the harmful language of the last 52 years that we had in the Book of Discipline, particularly around LGBTQ plus persons, but also just the way that those historic votes were cast. I mean, it was mostly on consent calendar. So it was without the acrimonious debate, the harmful language spoken from the floor and recorded in the Daily Christian Advocate. That wasn't there. And so that in and of itself was historic, yet alone the outcomes of the votes themselves. And I mean, I remember sitting with the other general secretaries when I think it was the funding ban was the first one to be overturned. And when it was overturned on consent calendar, we all kind of like looked at each other, like, y'all all see, you're reading the consent calendar the same way that I am, right? That this was on there and there was no discussion about it. It just passed. We were all kind of like thinking back to our days of our polity classes and making sure we were remembering how the church functions correctly. Because I think for so long it felt like it had dysfunctioned. Yeah. So the historic votes, for the first time in our history as a separate denomination apart from Wesley. So since 1784, this is the first time where on paper, we're not excluding anybody from any level of the church. And that's huge. And that's kind of been my, the thing that I've focused on the last couple of years is just how amazing an opportunity that is for the future United Methodist Church, that we are not discriminating on paper against anybody. And how do we ensure that the future United Methodist Church, so the present and future, can actually live into that and embody that? That's the work that we have to do now, right? On paper, we look great. In practice, we got work to do. So let's do it.
I love the beauty of the mundaneness of the passing of these legislative pieces, right? Because like I knew folks who would like come in who are observers and like they were ready for the celebration or ready for the lament, like just ready for the thing. And then we did kind of the same thing. We're like, wait, did we just pass that with the consent calendar? Did we do? And I felt like, okay, finally, some of these things are becoming commonplace, not because they are unimportant, right? But that people are not being defined wholly by these items and the things that separate us. It is not defining in the same way that it is part of the community. And that so, for example, in my previous appointment, we had a lesbian couple who attended the later service. And I had an open conversation with them as some of these things were coming down, because I wanted to check my language of like, is this okay? Or how are you hearing this? This kind of thing. And they were like, look, we don't want to be made an example of. We want to come to church. We want to raise our kids. We want to be a part of the community, and we don't want to be a token. We also don't want to be like, oh, look, we have lesbians in leadership, right? She said, we want to be accepted as every other member is accepted. So there's something beautiful about some of these things passing to say like, oh, because I know that this particular couple was like, thank God. Like it's there's a beauty of the mundaneness of that, which helps us celebrate in other ways. So I thought it was I was shocked. I was surprised. I did the same thing, Dr. Boggan, as kind of like, wait, did we just do that? Like, oh, okay, that was much less dramatic than I thought, but maybe that's a really cool thing.
Ron, do you have anything you want to add? You were there, you were on the floor, you were in the room, in the prayer room, you were hearing people coming and going.
Yeah, no, just the same point. It was almost like people were giving birth, right? Folk would run up to the prayer room and say, they'd be whispering, and it was just this settled excitement of, oh my God, I can't believe what just happened. But whispering it, right? As if I said it out loud, they'll catch it and try to stop it, right? So that just kept happening during General Conference. But again, I go back to this, I may have started here, but just this piece around identity. Because I think that from 21 to now, at least from the vantage point of where I sit in the conversations I'm in, there's always this sense of who are we now? And what does that mean? How do we lean into that? And again, I saw that at General Conference. We'd have bishops come into the prayer room to pray and just want to sit still, not be talked to or prayed for, but just need space to wrestle with delegates and from different countries and different folk, just trying to make sense of this moment of, okay, we did a thing, now what? And I think that's indicative of how we move forward, is to make space to accept what has been and what it means to us. Yeah.
Yeah. And I do want to talk about, I don't want us to just stop at May of 2024, because we've had now a year, we've had 16, 17 months of, Ashley said it really well. On paper, it looks like this, but we all know living into it is where there's growing pains. We're honestly, we're kind of still like toddlers trying to figure this out. So what does that look like from where you guys are standing?
Yeah, so 2 Sundays after General Conference was Pentecost. And I was preaching on Paul and how Paul's understanding of salvation changed over time. So early Paul, which is 1 Thessalonians, he said, we will be saved. Middle Paul, 1 Corinthians, he says, we are being saved. Very Wesleyan. And then when we get to Romans, he says, we have been. Under the second Adam, we have been saved. So it's a realization. So I'm preaching this on Pentecost Sunday, and I get to nothing can separate you from the love of God. Paul didn't start there, but he eventually got there. And as I'm saying this, a trans woman walked into the sanctuary in a skin-tight purple dress and sat on the front row of the church. And I felt immediately the spirit of Asbury was being tested. As Ashley said, on paper, we had just passed that we would not be shunning anyone. And here we are, 2 Sundays after General Conference, my former congregation was being tested. And a lot of folks asked, like, well, what are we going to do about this? So I said, well, I'm going to take her to lunch and get to know who she is. And it was just a fascinating human being. But for a lot of people, it was too much too soon. When you have spent, and this is what Paul talks about in Romans 14, in terms of eating meat and not eating meat, right? It's not whether you eat meat or don't eat meat. It's being with your neighbor in charity. Because there are a lot of folks who cognitively up here understood that it was changing, but in their heart, they had spent a lifetime othering people. And now the other is sitting with them, and it's too much, too fast. We had a lot of people leave. And that was heartbreaking. But to your point, Dr. Boggan, on paper, we had solved a lot of issues, and in practice, we still have a long way to go as a community of faith. So Dr. Bell, to your point, what now? A lot of work. What now? A lot of work on the soul of the people and living into the, can I drop some marketing? The vitality of who we are as United Methodists, So the what now hit us real quick.
Yeah, I think I spoke at probably 5 or 6, if not 7 different annual conferences that year. And I can tell you some annual conferences, specifically those up north, it was a party. Literally, there was one annual conference where they had balloons on stage and, it was a party. And there were other annual conferences, some closer, Crystal, to where you and I live, where it was a funeral. It literally was a funeral. It was just sad. It was quiet. It was full of grief. It was, and so I just think depending on where you were and what the larger makeup of the annual conference was or is, there was a different experience. And I think being able to hold both of those things together, that for some people, this is a party, for others, this is a funeral. And we're all united in our Methodism. And what does that mean? And what does that look like is the challenge, I think, now.
I think what brings me hope in this kind of what now moment is the work that is going on within the United Methodist Church, particularly like the new vision statement, right? And this really critical work that's being done at most levels of the church about who are we and what kind of witness are we going to be in this world? And really, there's been a renewed interest in our history and our heritage of what it's meant to be Wesleyan or Methodist and how we show up within certain spaces. And for me, that's been incredibly awe-inspiring to see, and to see people really want to make bold statements about who we are, even if it might make some folks uncomfortable, right? And that's something that we haven't done historically when other churches have split off. We haven't actually changed or done the work of identity. And we're actually, at least it seems like, doing that work. And I can't wait to see it continue and to see it be lived out and embodied in new ways.
And I'm going to name drop Todd Rossnagel, who is the head of communications for the Louisiana Annual Conference. And he's going to be so touched and thrilled that I just said his name on a nationally recognized podcast. But Todd has said this all along, that in 2024, we spent a lot of time, and prior, we spent a lot of time in saying who we aren't. And it's now time to concentrate on the story of who we are, which is always, and that's the secret behind love your enemy, is that you're no longer defined by that which is outside of you, is the secret to loving your enemy. So just, if you ever have Todd on, great guy, Crystal, and he knows what he's talking about. And he likes to send me Cubs swag anytime I mention him in public. So I look forward to maybe a jersey this go around. But I think Todd is right. We spent a lot of time talking about what we're not, and now it's time to talk about who we are.
Well, thank you. And I'm so glad that you're going to be getting some new Cubs swag. And Todd is great. So thank you for mentioning that. This is the perfect segue, because we have talked about really the time span of the last 100 episodes, 4 years. And I'm going to ask you to all be prophets now and kind of look, if we, in another 100 episodes, if Get Your Spirit in Shape continues and it's 4 years, who are we going to be? Who are going to be in 4 years as the United Methodist Church? And we'll put this in a time capsule, and we'll open it up in 4 years at the 300th episode.
I think initially, let me be real, smaller, but I don't think that's a bad thing, right? I think there's a season of pruning. There's a season of being intentional about what we are planting and which seed, based on our resources. And there's some, maybe it's Barna, I forget, that talks about how churches need to prepare in decreasing their budgets by 10% per year to get a handle on this. And I don't think that's untrue. In the short term, I think that is true. But I also know enough that now that, to use another metaphor, the wild olive shoot has been grafted onto the root that has been established and that is disease-free. The sin of homogeny is that you open yourself up to disease, right? So diversity is the antidote to that. And what happens when you graft in the wild olive shoot to that which is existing, you get really great wine. It's going to take a while to get there. There's going to be a lot of hard work with fewer servants in the fields with us together. But at the end of the day, after we crush all that has grown, you get good wine at the other end of it. So I do think it's going to be smaller. I think it needs to be much more intentional and streamlined, but eventually there's going to be some really great wine on the other end of it.
I hope bolder, and that probably will lead to smaller. But if the United States and kind of the world continues towards this path of Christian nationalism, I think the United Methodist Church has to be bolder. We have to be bolder in defining what Christianity is, what Wesleyanism is, what United Methodism is, and scream it from the rooftops in order to show that true Christianity is all about love, full stop, period, and not about, anything else. And so I look forward to seeing us be bold and taking risks and making statements and putting our bodies out front to face corruption if we have to face it head on.
Yeah, I would agree. I think historically, as goes the government, so goes the church for the United Methodist Church. You can kind of track those two things together. And so I think when you look at where our nation will be in 4 years, and then parallel that to the church, what you will discover is this fearlessness that I think will be bred out of a sense of we're all we got left. To Ashley's point, why not be bold? Why not step up? And so I think about my kids at 10 and 14. They're not going to pay the capital campaign to keep this building's roof up. They're not going to, right? But they will protest and show up for, the community and feed and serve and do. And so I think you're going to begin to see in 4 years a lot more of entrepreneurial activism tied to a Christian biblical base that is fearless versus what we know of as sustained historical church. And so I think you'll begin to see that shift louder in social media than we see it now in 4 years. Yeah.
And I think the church would do well to recognize there's a phenomenon with my kids. I have 4 kids, so prayers accepted. Now my kids deal with screens. Okay, it's very simple, but I think it's really profound. Anything that is letterbox is deemed entertainment. Movies, music videos, everything. Things that are vertical, where they scroll, is deemed as truth. That's how they learn about the world. Whether it's good or not information, that's how they learn through Reels and TikTok and this kind of thing. The church needs to recognize that we need to stop being about entertainment and entertaining people and making things feel good and learn to be truth. We need to change our orientation, so to speak, with this next generation and recognize the way, Dr. Bell, like you were saying, they're not going to give a rip about the sanctuary as much as they are about their neighbor on the street protesting to make change happen, right? So we need to change our orientation. We need to stop being entertainment and start being truth, and then we'll get closer to where we need to be.
Yeah.
Wow, that's exciting, and also we've got a lot of work to do, to move and keep moving in that direction. But so our just to bring us full circle, our Get Your Spirit in Shape listeners know that the final question we ask all our guests is, how do you keep your spirit in shape? So rather than ask each of you that question today, we put together a little audio package from our archives that we're going to just drop in here and share next. And so just take a listen.
So I really think lately, so we've been doing the Mad Mamas group since January. It's kind of a new thing we're trying out where, being a mom these days, you're pulled in so many different directions between kids and work, home, family, just life. And we meet once a month, which, probably could be more often. But again, as moms, it's really hard to schedule it. And we sit in a circle and we drink wine. But we've started asking ourselves the questions that Wesley originally asked his bands. And again, I don't mean to keep plugging books, but this originally comes from Reverend Chris Heckert's Grace Group Models, where he's updated these questions. And what we've discovered the 3 months that we've been doing this is that we never make it past the first question. That takes the full time that we're there. And that first question is, how is it with your soul? And we sit around drinking wine and just spilling our souls out to one another in a way that is beautifully vulnerable, in a way that kind of breaks through. I think so many of us, because of social media and just the way that we are supposed to present ourselves in this world, think that everybody's life is going well except their own. And this is a space where we can really share how it is with our soul. And sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's bad. Sometimes we've learned we all have a lot of souls. Some of them are doing good on a given day and some aren't. But that for me is where my spirit has been finding community, access for growth and energy for growth, and kind of a safe space to not be okay too.
Oh, so I've got 5 things, and I usually do this on Fridays, and today is Friday.
Yes.
I get I get my Jeep washed. I go have a good cigar and a great old fashioned. Right, I get my hair trimmed up and put together, and just spend the day if I can with family outside if it's warm enough. A long drive. That's important to me.
Yeah, so I'm super proud of myself. I set an automation to my phone because if you have an iPhone, there's a little deal where you can set automations. You know, like when you arrive at home, it texts your friend that you're there or whatever. So I have set my phone to text me every day at sunset, and the text said, "What was a blessing today?" So every day it causes, and I get surprised every day because that's just the kind of world I live in. I'm like, oh, I got a text. Who texted me? Oh, I did. I texted myself. It always surprises me because sunset is at a different time every day. It automatically causes me to stop and to ponder and to consider what was a blessing today. And I do think it's helpful, even in midnight, even in the darkest of time. Is there some way we can remember hope? Is there something over which to be thankful for? It may be small, it may be hard to see, but at least every day when the sun sets, I'm reminded to think of a blessing of the previous day. And that's just been, for me in my own soul, that's just been really, really helpful.
So I want to really thank the three of you for being here. It was, I just loved being here to hear it and appreciate your ministries, your wisdom, your just all that you do, your selflessness for the United Methodist Church, and it's been a really fun time and so special to have you for our 200th episode. So thank you so much.
Oh,
Thanks
thank you
for having
for
us.
inviting us. Yeah,
Thanks,
I'm
Crystal.
honored and so excited to see where this goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wonder how many people you asked before you asked me. Like, I'm just kind of scratching my head like, Crystal, what were you thinking? Who said no? Let me call him up. No, thanks for having us. This is great.
This is great.
That was the Reverend Dr. Ron Bell, Dr. Ashley Boggan, and the Reverend Matt Rawle joining us as guests on our 200th episode. To learn more, go to umc.org/podcast and look for this episode where you'll find helpful links and a transcript of our conversation. If you have questions or comments, feel free to email me at a special email address just for Get Your Spirit in Shape listeners, gysis@umcom.org. If you enjoyed today's episode, we invite you to leave a review on the platform where you get your podcast. Thank you for being a Get Your Spirit in Shape listener during these past 200 episodes, and we invite you to join us for the next 100. I'm Crystal Cavanis, and I look forward to the next time that we're together. Today's podcast episode was brought to you by the United Methodist Communications Foundation. As you've listened today, a pastor in Zimbabwe reached thousands with a message of hope on social media. A church in rural Montana continued discipling the next generation online. From local churches to global platforms, from small villages to large digital audiences, your generosity sets real ministry in motion, equipping these messengers with tools, training, and support. For a limited time, when you give $200 or more, or join our Storyteller Society with a gift of $25 a month, you'll receive a limited edition Cross and Flame mug. Give now and make your impact at umcom.org/GT2025. That's umcom.org/GT2025.